Iain, thanks so much for joining me on the Surf Nation chat. Really, really excited to talk.
At least you're saying that now. In about half an hour, you might be like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that wasn't such a good idea.
No, this is a topic. This is a great topic. And I think, in my experience at Surf and talking to people, this is something that is a challenge that across the board is staffing and trying to maneuver around. We're going to get into standards and then giving people freedom, trust we're going to talk about. But the aspect I really want to start with was, okay, when I've talked to you, I've got a really, you give off the vibe that you're so happy with kind of getting your staff together in that process of almost like building a team on the pitch. You built the team off the pitch. So when you're mapping that out in your head, mapping it out on a laptop, whatever it is, what are some things when you're looking at a coach that you want to work with you for alongside you? What's the non-negotiables, or what's the profile you look for?
I think it varies a little bit. I don't think there's any set formula. I think I've been in the game a long time, and one of the things that I do trust in myself is my ability to read people. And it sounds almost like cheesy, but one of the first things I look at when I'm talking to people is their likability factor. Like, do I like you? Do I feel others will like you? And we all, like, when we talk about, from Folsom Lake Surf to San Diego Surf to New England Surf, we're all in different parts of the country. We're all at different stages. And for here in this part, Folsom is very much a community. And there's certain values here that just are very different than even some areas that are 40 minutes away. And in Folsom, it's like it's an educated place. It's got a good demographic that way, and people want certain things. So to have somebody that is, say, just abrasive and that, it's not going to work here. So when I am talking with coaches, or I'm looking at bringing people in, it's a little bit of are people going to like you? Number one, are you genuine? Are you wanting to do this and do it for the right reasons? And just talking with them, I can figure out that part. We talk about it, but and when I'm talking with coaches, it's like you have this, if you have a more experienced coach that you're looking to bring in, I think it's easier to just very easily check on their credentials. I mean, you talk about it being a small world. Soccer world is a small world. It doesn't take much to find out how do people feel about this coach. And so when you get good, reviews, then it's easier to say, hey, bring someone in. And I've been in this area for a long time, so I know most people, but that's with the experienced ones, their credentials, their licenses, all that, right? The reputation. But then what I'm trying to do here with our club is there's a new generation of coaches coming in, and I have this profile I've been looking at, younger coaches, players. And so when I talk with them, it's not so much, hey, what are your credentials? It's actually, I almost interview them as they've just finished playing the game. So what type of player are you? What position did you play? How do you view the game? Do you have this enthusiasm that you want to take this playing and get into coaching? Because as we all know, especially in the youth game, coaching's a grind. It's not just, oh my gosh, we got a medal this weekend and it's awesome. It's like, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 6:30, it's hot. It's really hot here. So are you willing to do that? You've got 3 games this weekend and you're going to be dealing with 100-degree weather. Are you willing to do that? Or do you want to go just take another job? So for me, when I talk to these guys and these young coaches that I'm trying to get in, it's like, are you really genuine and excited to do this? And a perfect example is I do have a young coach in here. In fact, I used to coach him, and I always said I coached him. When I first coached him, he was like 14 years old. And I was like watching this kid, he's super mature, great center mid. And we all know what we feel about if center mids have got this brain. And I was looking at this kid going, this kid's going to coach one day. And immediately that I took over a couple of years ago, I hired him, and he's turned out great. And so when you look at this profile, this young guy, he's got enthusiasm. He's smart. He was a center mid. He wants to play the game the right way. This is what I look for. So it's different based on, okay, I want you on my team, as you were saying, because you're this experienced guy that I want to bring in. And then I look at this guy, you're not experienced, but I want to bring you in because I feel like you're really going to grow into this coach. So it's just different. But you are right. I do look at, I think we've got on the competitive side here, we've got 33, 34 coaches in our club now. We have 51 teams. And I feel like these coaches are a team. That's what I'm trying to grow. So
Brilliant.
It's different. It's a challenge. I mean, it's an art to bring them in.
Big time. This is the big reason why I was excited about this conversation, amongst other things, of course. But the traditional values, passion, energy, there's not as much around of it today because of the information, perhaps overload, and maybe it's the phone and the devices. But the personality still, I can feel that again from your. You have to have the personality to match philosophy, people, relationships.
You do. I mean, and again, each of our surf clubs we're all so different, and we sit in different parts of the country, different demographics, that you can't just say, hey, what works over here is going to work at Walnut Creek Surf, is going to work at, Folsom Lake Surf, is going to work in the middle of the country. It's not always going to work. But I do think there's that kind of core principle of the enthusiasm to want to do this. Like, does someone you're speaking to, do they actually respect the actual position? Because for me, when you are, like, say you coach 2 teams, I mean, let's be honest, there's probably 30 plus kids that you're affecting. So do you respect the fact that you're in charge of these young players, these young people, both on and off the field, in a way that you're going to affect them? Are you enthusiastic that you want to do this? Are you really almost in the ways of, are you going to be like a teacher? And that's one of the things, like for me, where I knew I wanted to coach, but because I always wanted to actually be a teacher. And so I was able to marry the two of, a soccer career that I had and the teaching career I wanted into coaching. And I've always viewed it as, you're not so much a coach, you're a teacher. And I think in today's world, when you were just talking about all the other devices these kids are on, I think there's more to this than just what we're teaching them between the lines. And that's one of the things I do look at. They especially here, are you, again, going back to it, are you a good person? That's who I want to be around these kids.
Let's stay on that then, because this is, again, a fascinating topic, the coach development, because obviously, like, your role, you're wearing a lot of hats, and when you're getting that former player transition into coach, you're a coach developer, and in that there, you're trying to teach. Yeah, there's going to be the fun stuff of, as we all know about, and the stuff that you're standing out, and it's this slog. How do you go about the process of kind of that introduction of communicating, A, what this kind of profession is, B, standards, because that's not easy either, saying like, listen, there's parts of this that aren't glamorous, but you have to deliver at a high level still because of the expectations.
Yeah, I think if you look at, in a couple different ways. In fact, I'll take it back to where, when you talk about standards, and I think that was the one thing, because like any club, we're at a certain stage right now. I've been here for 2 years as a director of coaching, and it's changed quite a bit, but it's not quite where we want it to be. So if I go back to a couple of years ago when I walked in, Fritz Libby, who's our executive director who hired me, was like, standards. We need coaching standards. And I'm like thinking, and I was at a previous club that's not, it's in the area. It wasn't really a rival club. We're rivals now because we've grown, but it wasn't so much a rival when I walked in. And I was like, coach standards, I understand that, we'll get to this level. But when I was hired, it was a few weeks before the tryouts. And so there was still, the previous season was ending, and I was able to kind of go watch some games, some trainings for this end of the year stuff. And I remember going to the first game, and I was like, wow, that's not very good. I was watching the coach behavior. I was watching parent behaviors, and I'm like, okay. Went to another game, and I walked up, and the game had started, and I was looking at the bench area, and honestly, Gary, it looked like a crime scene. There was like backpacks everywhere, garbage everywhere. The coach wasn't, I think he had, like, it was not even a surf shirt on. And I was like, ooh, okay, another one. Went to a third game, a fourth game before actually the tryouts hit. And I walked away from those games in a couple of training sessions with a notebook full of standards. And where I thought, okay, the standards of this level of coaching, it was actually the standards of behaviors, dress, bench area, trainings, like, getting organized, where it's like, okay, this is where your team's training. Here's just the area where can you get the kids to line up backpacks even? It was like basics. So that was the first thing when I did that. I kind of analyzed everything. And then once we had the new staff in, and, I got rid of some coaches and hired some coaches pretty quickly, because it was only a few weeks, from being hired to having their first tryouts. And it was the meeting of just, hey, here's our standards. And then after the meeting and the tryouts, then it was me. Actually, I would go to trainings and I'd go to games, and it was just following up. And then it was, again, having more meetings and then following up. And then you could just see the standards starting to grow. And it's now 2 years later, it's almost unsaid, that's that kind of organic growth that you've got, coaches that are taking pride in what they're doing and having those standards that continually are raised. And you can see it in the play now. Our teams are more organized. Our players are more, I think, respectful of the process of showing up for trainings, being there for games. It's just much more. I know we're an amateur organization as far as amateur players, but the professionalism of our club has grown, and that's been the standards. And it sounds simple, but man, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And it's right now, I think we're good, but we're not perfect. That's for sure.
And that growth process, again, something that fascinates me. You're, as you go in and you start that process that was in business, like Norman performing. Mm-hmm. That Storming process, to cast your mind back, and I'm sure you can pretty easily. Once you have that group in and you've established what the standards are, mm-hmm. And you make light of it, but I think it's worth going back and touching mm-hmm. on it. The fact that, you had the meetings and you looked, but like, how exhaustive was that kind of process of, I know how repetitive, like, listen, this needs to be better, or was it? Or was that a painful process, or was it easier than you thought it would be? Or?
It definitely wasn't easy. I don't think it was painful. I think, coaches are always there's no difference in how coaches always view a director of coaching. That's the boss. And I think, I learned over the years too, of being at previous clubs at times from the directors of how not to be a director. Mm-hmm. So many of them sit behind keyboards and, send out their memos and, hey, this is the way it needs to be. Coaches need to actually see you doing the work. And the fact that I'm a coach of teams in our club, there's standards that I hold myself to. And coaches trust you when they see that you put the work in. They'd see that you hold your teams to those standards. So it's not just me, again, sending out that email that so many directors do. It's that I'm on the fields, my teams look the part, and I always tell my players and parents, hey, I'm the coach, but I'm also the director of coaching the club. Our players literally can get away with absolutely nothing. I go, because I can't be looking at that coach over there in that quadrant of the field and saying, hey, by the way, your players over there are not wearing the correct socks for training if my players over here aren't wearing the correct socks for training. So when coaches trust you that you're not just there sitting up here and just, casting out all these memos and everything, but you're actually putting the work in and you're upholding the standards, they now start to look at it that way. So that's part of it. I think as well, I show up at games and you go there, and it's not that I'm overbearing, but it's like I take note of things, and then it's like, hey, there's a couple players here, and we talk about it. And it's just, that's almost organic growth over the 2 years where it's been a personal relationship with my coaches. And I think that's one of the things I've done well over these couple years, is where it's not just, again, as this guy sitting in this throne of a chair. It's actually just actually sitting at the Starbucks across from them or having a meeting and, hey, this is how things going with the team. Because this is what I've noticed, whether I was watching on VO or whether I was at the training session. These are some of the feedback that came because we all, and we have our own network of communication, whether it's be other parents, our coaches, and just sitting with them and saying, hey, this is some of the things I see, and here's how we can improve it. Not that it has to get better, but we want it to get better. And it's been, man, the amount of meetings has been crazy, but it's a lot of work. But again, I feel like one of the great things now is that I feel like I'm in touch with who our club is, who our membership is, who our coaches need to be. And we brought in those type of coaches, and our staff now is very in line with this. And I got to say, we have a great staff. I really enjoy so many of them. And so sitting with them now, it's almost like we get to talk soccer as I'm working with them as a director to a coach, helping them. But it's like we get to talk about the game and how their players are and how the team is growing, how it's maybe not growing and how it's not doing well. So how do I help and how do we fix it? So I wouldn't say it's been painful, but I wouldn't say it's been easy. It's just been doing the work, and it's been good.
You've answered my next question, I bet you, because my next one was going to be, okay, you've done the formal, the standards, and then obviously managing the standards, which again, maybe it's just I always find that to be the hardest part, but you articulating how you go through it was my next question, which is going to be, well, how do you develop the trust? But it sounds like you develop the trust alongside as you build the connections, the face-to-face is so vital for you. That's why.
Yeah, I think that I think to develop trust in coaches, I mean, number one is you've got to have some, I guess, credibility when you step into this job, whether it's your reputation if you were coming in from someplace else, or say my reputation of who I am. But it's like, it's not my reputation because I said it's this. I think there's got to be credibility because others are saying this about you. And I do have that in a good way for the most part. But but when you do have a reputation of having credibility, that's one thing that other coaches will look at. Now, to back it up is another thing. So in regards to them trusting you, is one of the things that I made sure is that my coaches feel as though that they're in a safe environment, that I have their back, that I'm not sitting over their shoulder going, hey, how do I get rid of this guy? It's more like sitting there with them. Okay, how do I help? Right. And there's been plenty of instances, as we all know in this game, where whether it's from a parent towards a coach towards a player towards a coach, that we have incidents that we have to take care of. And I think over this time, I've done a good job in my own mind. I feel like I've done a good job meeting with parents that have had issues, meeting with the coaches who have had some issues with that, and always kind of walking the line of, but I'm on the coach's side to make sure they feel like they're safe and they're protected. That does not mean that they don't have to uphold standards, but they have to know that just because a parent has come in and complained, we're not jumping onto the parent side. And so over time here, coaches have felt that and sensed that, and they will say, and I know this from others, that they'll say, hey, by the way, your coaches do trust you. And I feel like that's a great thing, because now I can now sit with them, or when I do now get to this, and I want to get to this next stage this year, when I am sitting there and we're talking about it, there's credibility there. There's that trust there. Listen, not all coaches are perfect. We know that. Even to the point at times when we do have grievances with parents, and I'll say this, I know the coach is not 100% in the right, but to be able to go and manage it and say, okay, even to a parent that's had this grievance, it's like, okay, I get it. Coach is still human. So how do we work this out? And then to be able to, I feel like we've worked out so many situations that the coaches now feel like, okay, he's on my side. Right? Now, that being said, they've also watched me walk several coaches out the door, even mid-season, right? Where they're like, there's that, okay, there's those standards of, okay, he has my back, but I better make sure that my standards, whether it's my behaviors coaching a game or how I communicate with players, are up to that level, or, I'm not going to be here. So yeah, we've had the highs of, our growth of players and coaches, and we've had the lows of in the middle of the season saying, you can't coach here at Surf.
How do you manage the methodology space between giving the coach that freedom to plan their sessions, run their sessions, or versus keeping them on track? I know it's not binary, one or the other, but like, how do you move around that space?
Honestly, I think a year from now, I could probably give you a more accurate answer, or be able to validate exactly what that question needs. We're not there yet. I mean, to be quite honest, in coming into this club a couple seasons ago and where we are now, like I've talked about, we've had the growth, but walking in and very quickly realizing the only way to take a club that was, I would say, functioning at a second tier level and almost time dysfunction, how do we get it to operate in a way that we want it to get to? How do we get to the standards? And for me, it was straight up coaching standards. Go after coaches, whether it's bringing coaches in that are of higher level, moving coaches out that were not going to help us get to where we want to get to, improving the coaches that are here on staff, educating the coaches. So everything for me has not so much just been about, say, that curriculum or methodology. It's actually about how do I amalgamate the best coaching staff I can get, right? And then the next stage was literally where I feel we're at, is to get to more of the curriculum and the methodology. If you really want to be truthful, and I think every coaching director would agree with this, if you want to have the easiest job in the world, hire a whole bunch of great coaches and then sit back and be like, well, he's taking care of this team and that team, right? I don't have to do anything there. Oh, look, she's taking care of this team, right? That's the perfect world for a DOC. But in the end, it's like, how do we get it to that standards? So in hiring coaches and developing coaches to get to that standard, that's been my first thing. And you can see it because there are some coaches here that I haven't had enough time or need to go work with, because they're doing a great job. So it's like, okay, how do we build up our younger coaches? How do we build up these coaches of these second teams or third teams? Because we know players at the young age are going to grow. So where at times I don't always work, but there are better coaches, and that's still growing in a good way because they're doing a good job. And that's kind of been the thing. How do I get as best coaching staff in as possible? And right now I feel I have very good coaches, very dependable coaches. And I think that's the standards going back to when I look at coaches. One of the things is their presence. Are you always present? One of the things that drove me crazy with some coaches at other clubs, and even when I first came in here, was the number of coaches were like, hey, I'm going to have to cancel this session, or I'm not going to be able to be there. By the way, I'm gone for this next week. And by the way, and then this coach is sick this week, and really he's sick again the next week, or he's out of town. The first thing, be present, be dependable, right? And I feel like we have a really good staff that way, is that there's quality to them and they're dependable. So this next phase that you were talking about, the curriculum, the methodology, we're just literally really going to start to get there this year.
The video, you've mentioned it there a few minutes ago, and you mentioned your email, and I thought this was brilliant. And I really want to get into this. Talk about, looking at, the process that you go through about, taking a peek at the sessions, taking a peek at the games, and things that jump out to you. Like, what's your process of going through both of them, really, if you wouldn't mind just looking at both game and training?
I think I'll look at the VO, and we have 3 VO cameras that go around to all our teams. We have now several teams that have their own, which I'm on their accounts. We're getting another one, and it's like I view it as, obviously it's great when we start talking about the collegiate experience in recruitment. How do we do it so players now have game film to put together for all that? I actually view it as more an educational piece, or for me, an evaluation piece, where I can be like, okay, I literally haven't been able to go to any of these teams' games, but there's 7 of them on the VO. And I can go in there and I can take 10, 15 minutes of a half, just watch the first half here, second half here. And you spend like 20 minutes just looking at a game. And then for me, I just look at, and often here's the great thing is the VO often starts, they get it running, and I get to see some of the warm up. And I'm like, like there's been some where I'm like, okay, that's that's an awful warm up. And then you get to the game and I'm like, you see the team they start slow and you're like, okay, so I get to go talk to the coach about, hey, let's pick up the quality of the warm up, right? Even to the point, and I've had to do that with some coaches. But for me, the first thing I look at is from the opening whistle, is the team organized? I mean, do they look the part? Is there a structure to them? What happens when they don't have the ball? And what's the defensive structure like? When we do have the ball, are we actually trying to play the right way? And I know people can say, there's so many ways you can look at what is the right way. I think every one of us, if we're truly talking about player development, we look at players and say, okay, do they have a touch? Are they keeping the ball on the ground? Are they trying to play in a positive, in a progressive way? And that's my question. Are they? And if they're not, then it's like, okay, now I get to go to a coach and be like, okay, watching a game, here's the things that I feel we need to work on. And we talk. So.
Right. Yeah, fantastic. On the topic of video or even analysis, and we get a little bit of a discussion about the Euros, and that's why I want to start the interview quickly. See, when you're like, because I feel the same way. Like, yeah, the Euros is, it's great for an event, and the games have been decent, and it's tactical chess and all that there. But have I been running to the TV every day to get to watch the games? No, not really. But when you're in the player development space and when you're in youth, I always feel as if there's part of you that's looking at the player for tomorrow and trying to impact that project. Like, what do you feel the game? I guess two questions. What do you feel the game needs for the next generation? What's missing, and what do you think the youth space could do a better job in? $1 million question.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, okay. Let's redo U.S. soccer right now. No, it's and you are correct. I mean, I've watched enough the Copas to shake my head. I've watched enough of the Euros as well to be like, man, that's super boring. The Copas, obviously, I'm Canadian. I played for the Canadian national team, so I had that. Watching them play, I was excited to watch them play. I think Jesse Marsh, we were talking about, I think he's done a great job with them. The fact that so few teams in the world actually, they don't have the ball. So everybody sits back, low block, everybody sits back. That's where the Euros for me have been fairly boring overall. You can still see the tactical, ways of how things have kind of changed and evolved and see how it's going to go. But overall, the games are boring. Nobody really gets at it defensively. Nobody really high presses anymore. Not at that level. When they have the ball, it's patient. It's like, I'm not saying we need to go long ball, but it's like nobody really plays. I feel nobody really gets at it to go win it. They don't. And that's why I did enjoy in the Copas with Jesse March and the Canadian team get at it. And they did. And I think, honestly, even in the semifinal, if they'd taken a couple chances earlier, I mean, not that I feel like, hey, we're going to beat Argentina. I mean, Argentina, obviously, world class, but we could have caused some heart murmurs there in the Argentine crowd.
Late in the game as well, like 2 or 3 chances in the last 5 minutes. Yeah.
I just like the fact they were positive. And I think that's one of the things that's missing. Now, to go back to what you're talking about on the youth side of it, I've got a 12 boys, 2012 boys team that I think is a pretty good team. And we were talking about it because they're all soccer fans and they watch the games and talk about it. And I said, okay, so here's one of the things we're not going to be. We're not going to be the team that's just sitting back. Whether we're going to win, lose, drop, doesn't matter. We're going to play on the front. We're going to play with the ball. We're going to go at it. And when they can't get to that level, then how do we coach them to try to get to that level? And for me, it's a little bit more positive coaching I would like to see with the youth and not so worried about the results. And I know that was one of the questions you were going to talk about was results. And for me, I'm not a huge guy that, okay, like I've got a 2012 girls team in a tournament this weekend, not looking at any results beginning of the season. I'm just new to them. They're new to me. I just want to see, let's play. Regardless of the results, I want you to play. And I think there's still too many. And obviously when you start talking about, we were talking about it earlier, whether it's the quarterfinals, the MPL Nationals, where we've got a team in it. So they start thinking about results. Can we win that and get to the semifinals? So there's some game management in there. And I understand that part. But for the most part, what we're talking about is, say, our first teams that aren't competing for national titles, or our second or third teams that really were trying to get player development to the point that can they move up a team. It's not about any results. It's about how we're doing this. And I think there's still, especially at the professional, you know how much money is involved in the. It just seems like so many of them are just scared to go after the win in case they lose.
Oh, I completely agree. You said something really interesting before about Marsh. We're talking Marsh. You're saying, you know, he sometimes can be difficult for a defender to play Jesse Marsh. But if you look at it from a U12, U14 standpoint, surely that should exactly be trying to playing a system that stretches players, like a centre back sitting deep in a block. Surely isn't the model for player development, where they're not going to be exposed to those types of challenges.
No, it's funny you say that, because actually there was a scrimmage yesterday morning I had with my 2012 boys. It's really their first real true 11 aside, and we were playing actually one of our girls' teams is a couple years older. They're a good team. And my boys are pretty skillful, pretty good. They play some good combination stuff. They possess, they're technical, they get at it. Probably I think in the end we played about 70 minutes. And between the 3 periods, 75 minutes. And we probably had the ball most of the time. We looked good. And we got stretched because I want them going at it. We got hammered because every time they made a mistake, it was like what you talked about. My 2 central defenders completely exposed. Girls just ran over them, scored goals. And I'm like, and after the game, the boys were like, what? What just happened? I'm like, when you make mistakes at the next level and you don't understand, again, that compact style, or when you get exposed like that, you get hammered. So we're going to learn, but we're going to learn that way by trying to play in a positive way. And that they really had some good things, but man, they got their butts handed to them. But they got exposed, but they did well in a effects where it's like, even, one of the directors coaches that girls team is like, boys are going to be good. I'm like, they are. They're going to lose, but it's okay.
Yeah, I had this conversation a few weeks ago with Tam and Debs as well. We were talking about you're trying to communicate, the performance and trying to get beyond the result. Do you deal with much of the situation where you go watch a team and they do have the performance, they do play stuff that kind of gets you off your seat and inspires you, and the result doesn't go well, but you go up to that coach and say, hey, listen, that was actually a really good performance.
Yeah. That's the way I do look at it. Honestly, the result for me, because we've been in this game long enough to know that the results, especially at the U13, U14 age, it doesn't mean a lot when all of a sudden, fast forward them 3 years from now, that was great that they had this result at Surf Cup, but now those 3 players have moved on because the player development wasn't happening. There was things within the team that weren't managed right, and all of a sudden it's blown up. So what did it matter that they did well at U14 at Surf Cup? So for me, it's like, okay, it isn't about the results so much, but are we heading towards the results? Are we getting better? I want each team in our club, and that's the goal for me, is say, are we getting better throughout the year? And again, results are always going to be different how you look at a team. Like if it's a first team and they're playing in a good league, right, and we need to be competing a little bit more, yeah, I think there's a more tendency to look at results. Second team, what is the results that we're looking at? Or the same with the third and fourth teams even. For me, it's like the coach development. Are we able to can we move players up to the next team? That's the result, right? In the end, can they start competing with other teams at a higher level and still grow the team a little bit, maybe to move from a silver division league into the gold division, into the premier division? Can we do this as we're developing players? So it's never going to be about results. It's going to be about, I think, truly that development of players and teams. I mean, it's like how I ask my teams. Never ask them to win games. I ask them to compete to win games, never to win games. But I want them to compete to win games by playing the right way. And I know that others out there listening or seeing this will be like, yeah, whatever. No, it is the truth. I want them playing. And so by the time hopefully they get to U19, U17, U19, that they are legit players that college coaches are looking at if that's what these players want to do. And these teams are, when they play, people are going to walk away and go, you know what, that was fun. I couldn't tell you if they won or lost. I mean, in the end, it was a tie or whatever, but it was fun to watch them play. I mean, like I said yesterday, I had a blast watching my boys play yesterday. They got hammered, but it was fun to watch. It's good soccer, and I know they'll get better at things inside the game where they'll manage it, but that's kind of how I view things.
Yeah, brilliant. Last couple for you. Time has flown. How would you describe the environment for the players that you're looking for? You're asking these coaches to help create. What are some, I guess, non-negotiables from an environment point of view?
I mean, in regards to the players or the coaches?
And the players, sorry, like from the players' experience point of view.
I mean, how I look at players is similar to coaches when you have the standards. I mean, for me, I guess because I've had so much experience in higher level. And I've always had a way of looking at so many of these better players are the ones that kind of ran the team. And the youth game, right? It's always these better players and those parents who kind of run the team. And that's something that I'm kind of non-negotiable about. No parents run teams in our club. And that's been hard for some parents, I think, to accept over these last couple seasons. So for me, it doesn't matter if you're the best player. It's like there's non-negotiables and behaviors in how we ask players to be good teammates, be respectful. There's no difference between that 16th player on the team and the first player on the team. Be present, be accountable, and enjoy it. And if they're not going to enjoy it, if they're becoming a problem, then maybe we're not the club, right? Because I think this last 2-year growth in our club of the type of team and players we have has been awesome. I mean, it is getting better. So that's the standards. That's the environment. It's positive. It's not perfect. It never is. We all know that. There's still been issues with some players and with some teams, but it's going in a direction that I think everybody right now sees where it used to be to where it is. And that's been positive. And I think the overall feeling is that it's going to grow in a positive manner.
Brilliant. All right. We've talked about the club. We've talked about the players for tomorrow. We've talked about this current coaching generation. The next generation of coaches, Iain, not from a qualification standpoint, but in the way that, I mean, some of the values that you've raised in this conversation about being present, dependable, the personality, the trust. What are some ways do you think that we can kind of shape that for the next generation so we don't lose it?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I find that I'm probably dating myself, but when I go back to when I grew up playing the game, and the coaches, like you look at the sophistication of the game now, right? And you look at what we have available for resources from YouTubes of, podcasts, as you know, just you can find anything. Well, that didn't exist back then. And you look at this, how this wave of the game is being coached from tactical geniuses of, from the Peps of the world to the Jurgen Klopps of the world to, now you got these younger ones, even Mikel Artetas of the world. So much of this has kind of flown into the game. But I look at where, like, even people like myself and other players that have played the game with these coaches that weren't very tactical, didn't develop skills. Like, I even remember playing, I was training with, at the time, it was the Canadian national youth team. And we had some coaches that basically we were in that old school 4-4-2. And it was always how quickly could you get the ball from back there to up there, right? And that's not exactly player development involved in this. And I was and I was always caught in between because I liked the ball at my feet and play. So that's kind of how we grew up. But then we play the game and we realize, okay, but what is important in the development side of it? So when you look at all these influences of how now these young players have grown up over the past 10, 15 years and how we've taught them the game. So they're actually coming into it having been coached in a way that's so much of a higher level, right? And so when I find like these players are coming through, like if you look at some of the skill level, and I know the US didn't do well at Copas, right? But you look at the talent And even if it's not, say, world class, but you look at the talent of these players, it's so much better than what it was 15, 20 years ago, even though it's not maybe as successful as, say, that team that we had then. But you look at how they've learned the game. I'm watching these 20, 21, 22, 25-year-old coaches walk in, and they're better coaches than what I was, when I was 30 and 35, where it was like I was coaching myself how to coach. But these kids have learned from coaches that know how to coach. And they're walking in, well, this is what we did at trainings when I was a player. Well, that's way ahead of the game now. So I look at this younger generation as, honestly, some of them are just, I think they're going to be phenomenal coaches. And they're better served and better equipped to be that next wave of coaches. And I think that's the thing of allowing these younger coaches that have played the game and learned the game to come in and be them. The technical side of the game has grown incredibly in this country. I mean, I see it on even some of my teams now. I'm like, I played professional for how many years, and this kid has a better touch than what I ever had. And it's nuts. And I don't know if he'll go anywhere, but more skillful than what I was. And it's all because of the coaching that he's had throughout this time. And so many of these players now that have graduated, and that I go back to, like a team that, they're in their mid-20s now. When I had a team when they were U16, and they're all like 24, 25. It was a crazy year of how good these players were, and they're all, so many of them grown into now their coaching. And I feel they're just so far ahead of where I was when I stepped into coaching. And I think just finding them and developing them and keeping them in the game. And you talked about it. If these players didn't get to a certain level, unfinished business, can we get them in the game as coaches? Because, man, it's we have so many talented players out here now.
Who's the best player you've ever been on a pitch with, played with or against? You've probably been asked this 100 times.
Gosh, I tell you what, I mean, I was blessed to I played 30 plus games with the national team. And I've always said this, it was an honor to pull on, like everybody says, to pull on the shirt of your country, right? But to get out there and to play, and I remember my first 5 internationals were right before the 94 World Cup, and Canada hadn't made the World Cup. But my first 5 games, these teams had come across before the World Cup in the U.S., and it was Morocco, Brazil, Germany, Spain, Holland in 12 days. We played 5 games in 12 days. And I got to tell you, great thing I can say I played for my country. The greatest thing ever was recognizing, hey, I think I'm good, but that level, world class, unbelievable. Because we played against the Brazilian team that won the World Cup, and it was man for man, the roster that was there.
Romario playing?
I was marking him.
No way.
Well, hang on. Let me correct that. I was trying to mark him. One of the most incredible players I've ever seen. There was the original Ronaldo, was a 17-year-old sitting on the bench that never came out. But it was the days later, I have to say this, and there's actually a photo of it, but Dennis Bergkamp for Holland that I'm playing against, that was 6'4", I think, moves unbelievable. Just for me, and he was one of my favorite players to watch play, to be on the same field as him. I was like, wow, as he's just cutting us to shreds and playing it in behind to a guy named Marco Overmars, who's got some pace. These are the guys that, honestly, I will always look at guys like Dennis Bergkamp, one of the best ever. I have to say this, people I don't think realize, you remember Preki?
Preki, yeah.
I played against him both indoors and outdoors, with the national setup. And I got to tell you, one of the most skillful, brilliant footballers I've ever played against.
Wow. He was like a number 10.
He was unreal. His skill level was unreal. And I think because he played with our, national team, probably didn't get some of the respect. But I got to tell you, in playing against so many other, I think, world-class players and seeing him, he was phenomenal.
Did you ever play against Echeverry?
Yes, 1 game.
How good was he?
For a guy that didn't really cover a lot of ground, vision, skill, phenomenal.
Yeah.
I remember at one time somebody played him a ball and it was bouncing, and he just stepped into it and hit probably about a 45-yard volley rocket of a ball over the top into a guy running through. And I was like, That's why people can't mark him.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy. And that's where I, like, again, playing at a high level, I knew my place in the game. And then there's all that above you that you just got to see some of it firsthand. It was crazy. I have a huge respect for players in the game. So sometimes I get a little defensive when people start, knocking on people for certain things. I'm like, they just don't understand how great these guys are.
Yeah. I was that 94. I loved that World Cup, but my YouTube's rigged. My algorithms at YouTube, I watch more YouTube than anyone else, because just when I'm about to go to bed, they'll stick up a video of like Romario's greatest PSV goals, and I'll start, go on, 15 minutes, go on. Valderrama passes. Mid 90s playmakers and attacking players were just on a different level.
Well, I think because that's when the game was changing.
Yeah.
It was starting to change, where some of it, like the game was changing a little bit to where there was this superstars, where the media was changing and the social media and everything was starting to come into it. And like you talk about, it was part and parcel with it, where you talk about these great players that now people got to see on video, and you got to see it, now we look at it, everything's streamed and we can see anything we want almost. But back then, that was where I think the game really started to grow. There was personalities inside the game that went beyond you just going to the game and seeing it. It was like, now they're becoming worldwide stars. So there was I have some great memories, and some not so great of trying to chase down some of these guys.
You nailed it.
Pretty awesome.
You nailed it there. It's like, it was a generation that not much was streamed, but what was great. And today you can get anything, but it's crap.
I think people are just, they're a little jaded by how much they can see. It's like they get a little snobby that I'm like, you don't understand even this game. Like you look at the Euros. I mean, that game, that last game with Turkey and Austria. I mean, who would have thought that would have been like the game of the tournament? But the level of play of those players is phenomenal. Phenomenal.
It's unbelievable. And you're right. Even the US team is operating at a level that, still below par for expectations.
Right.
But a pretty high level to where it is, like.
Yeah, well, look at where all the players play now. Look at where all the players play. So anyway.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed the Copa America just for the madness of it. I just thought it was brilliant. Uruguay, Colombia last night would be my cup of tea, and I'd watch that any day of the week for just it's so.
Well, being a Canadian and being a former ice hockey player, there was some enjoyment in watching the same sport, I think, at times.
Brilliant. Iain, this has been fun. I've gone way off tangent. Liz, I really appreciate it. This has been magnificent. I know there's a lot of coaches that, again, in the conversations I have, I think that benefit from listening to this type of insight. And I know your empathy for the coachings alongside you has been amazing. So I really appreciate what you're doing. Keep it going. And
thank you.
Let's do it again.
Oh, I look forward to I'm excited about this next year, especially with our club. I really feel like I'm proud of where we're at and where we're going. And I think I've got a lot of what I would good teammates with me, term good teammates with me. Got a lot of good people. I'm going in the right direction, so I'm happy.
Brilliant. Keep it going. Iain, thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Good to see you.